Hey everyone, welcome. We are here reading this book, Designing the Mind, The Principles of Psychotecture, and we're on the chapter about understanding motivated bias. Okay, well, we're basically uncovering because this whole book's about changing your mind and restructuring your mind. If you don't like something your mind's doing, kind of restructuring. And so we're trying to learn about debiasing last time, which is getting rid of biases or things that you don't like about how your mind is working. So, yeah, understanding motivated bias. What do you think motivated bias is?
I'm not really sure.
Well, he
I guess
says
I'll have to find out.
He says some of our biases can be linked to direct biological pressures, meaning it was in some way advantageous for our genes for us to systematically misperceive reality. The most pernicious biases have this in common. They stem from desire. I refer to these as motivated biases. So they're biases motivated by something, like if you desire to be the best in your field, you might have biases against certain people because you want them to be kept down or something. I don't know.
Oh, right. Okay. And I do remember that I lo really love this point that he makes here about people are like everybody needs to know how to do critical thinking. Like that's the problem nowadays. Kids don't know critical thinking. But actually learning critical thinking skills is, as he says, no more likely to cause someone to think critically than it does to provide them with ammunition for arguing against whatever ideas they don't want to accept.
Hmm.
What do you think about that?
Wait, say
That's
that again?
the tools of rationality identical to the tools of rationalization.
So,
That if you learn how to do critical thinking and debating, it will just give you more skills to argue against whatever ideas you don't like.
interesting. And that would come because we have certain motivations guiding our ideas anyways. We have certain, you know, things driving us. And maybe we could say that's our chart. Our chart is what's driving us towards certain things. And we have biases because of that chart that we have, you know.
I don't know. I think it's also kind of lived experience, and our environment gives us biases against certain things. A- And to be clear, like I'm not saying that we shouldn't be teaching critical thinking. Like I do think that we should be teaching critical thinking and that I do think that like it's a very important skill. And I think it does have to go alongside though with uh identifying your biases and knowing, trying to clear those errors like he's trying to teach us to do.
Mhm. Interesting. So on the next page, he's talking about the bandwagon effect, which refers to our tendency to come to conclusions and make decisions based on what's popular. Um, that's an interesting set of biases. It's like what we just go with what's popular. And I think that I mean, I guess that's happening in astrology right now. Like everyone listens to the astrology podcast, which it's a great podcast, although I've never listened to it. But I just know that there's a bandwagon effect going on where it's like everyone listens to that because that's what everyone listens to. You know what I mean? And congratulations to the people making that podcast. They've done something correctly. I just think that there's also a bandwagon effect that happens with people, and it's like it's really hard to convince them otherwise. Like, well, you should also listen to this person, who has these altering views, and they're like, but that's not what everyone's doing, and so they go and do what everyone's doing, kind of thing.
Hmm. And do you think that's what's creating like these bubbles that everybody is kind of stuck in?
Well, maybe people get on a bandwagon for a good reason. Like maybe that is the best astrology show out there. Like I don't know if the being on a bandwagon is necessarily bad, but I guess the bandwagon is like you just get on it because that's the crowd's there. You don't even know if it's the best thing.
Mhm.
I guess we're trying to get rid of ways of thinking that are less helpful to our life. So I guess the warning there is like, don't necessarily just do something because everyone's doing it. Decide if it's really the best thing.
All right, like fall off the bandwagon.
Yeah. Yeah. To like get off the, yeah, you're off the wagon. Mhm. Unless it's our band and then they should get on the bandwagon. No, I'm just kidding. That was a motivated bias.
Then it's like a parade where like you're on the wagon, there are people beside the wagon, there's like throwing out some gifts to the crowd, there's like it's a whole scene, like that kind of a bandwagon. You don't necessarily have to ride on it. More like a pride parade.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah. Um, okay, so another one he says illusory superiority is the overestimation of, so we're basically just looking into different kinds of biases right now. So
Yeah.
illusory superiority is the overestimation of one's positive qualities and the underestimation of the negative ones.
Oh yeah.
So
All
that's like
right.
a bias towards your own awesomeness.
Yeah. I mean, that's better than imposter syndrome, where you're always questioning whether you deserve anything. But I guess what he's saying is like n none of these are great. It's good to identify, right?
Yeah. I guess if one of these is causing a problem for you, like you've been riding the bandwagon and you realize you rode yourself right off a cliff with a bunch of lemmings, then you should get off the bandwagon. But like, or if you think you're superior, but you're actually just like a normal person or, whatever, as we all are basically, like, I think, I think the inspiration of this chapter is like, if you have a way of thinking that's not working for you, change your way of thinking. That's the point of this book.
Yeah. Yeah. And understand that uh your ways of thinking can be improved. Like that, like when you're conscious of these biases, then it's easier to adjust than when you're not kind of self-reflective about what your biases are.
Yeah.
There's optimism bias when you're have wishful thinking.
Well, this actually,
There's
oh, sorry.
ostrich effect when you ignore the negative things. There's attribute substitution when you make decisions based on simplified simulations, which may bear little resistance to uh, uh, little
Resemblance.
resemblance. Yes, thank you, to reality.
Interesting. Well, here's one that's very popular that you talk about a lot is confirmation bias. That's when we look only for information that confirms our existing theories. That happens a lot. Well, people make that case against astrology that we're just doing confirmation bias.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because they're like, oh, you're a Leo and you're fiery. See, that's what Leos are, like something like that.
Yeah, totally. Um, yeah, so confirmation bias is like, well, because I'm always teaching my students to look for observable evidence of astrology and things, like if someone looks like their chart, you say, oh, look, there's some observable evidence of astrology in action. And some people would say I'm teaching them to do confirmation bias. Notice where astrology is confirmed around you. But I mean, I
Mhm.
think as an astrologist, you're teaching people to put on their astrology lenses and look around. Like you can take your astrology lenses off and see things non-astrologically, but I think we're teaching people to look astrologically. So we want to teach them how to confirm the astrological layer. And so it's almost like an encouraged confirmation bias.
Hmm. I see. Right on. All right.
All right. Well, I think the real question here is how do we debias? If we have a bias that's existing in our lives and it's tainting our clear-minded thinking, what do we do?
We read what he says about methods for motivational debiasing.
Yeah. So I like this one. He says it's Socratic questioning. He says, This is where you identify potential holes in your beliefs. And, I'm a Socratic professor and we do a lot of weird questioning to like get students to think and like move their minds around. So it's like, I love this Socratic questioning idea. It's
Oh yeah.
like if your mind is thinking in a way that you don't like, ask it some weird questions to unlock a different way of thinking, basically.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I like that. I like the way that when we do when we're reading the Course in Miracles, you will often like substitute a word in one of the kind of assertions with the opposite, a word of the opposite meaning, because then it's like jarring and it's like, wait a minute. Then it causes you to ponder like what in that sentence is true or not true to me, or what are the important words or concepts?
Yeah, totally. Um, yeah, so I mean, what is Socratic questioning? I guess it's just asking weird questions against the issue. Like if you had a confirmation bias, like you were looking at, something astrologically, then you would ask a question about it, be like, well, can an Aquarius ever be prideful? Or you can like ask a question to open your mind from that bias. I guess anyone can do that, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So what's his approach called counteraction? What do you think on page 56? What is that?
Oh, yeah. You know what? I have to say, I love his little diagrams. The diagrams that are like, here's a, what are the I and the D? That there's like evidence and a conclusion, and then there's this distortion. So, okay, so the counteraction seems to be where you try to create a desire that's just as passionate, but in the opposite direction, so that it will put the thing back on track,
Hmm.
right? So let's see. Say that, all right, we can go with my example of like when I have a bias against like people saying sarcastic things that are the opposite of what they really mean. And if instead I manufacture like a desire for the opposite, like I really am intrigued by people who like what people can come up with that's like they're where they're saying the opposite of what they actually mean. And that's like a fun thing to look forward to when that happens. Like maybe that's a counteraction
Mhm.
to my
Yeah,
bias.
totally. Um,
Because I guess and I guess the conclusion that I have is like, oh, that person isn't saying anything of value because they're just saying the opposite of what they actually think. That's like of no value. But if I were to really want them to do that, I would think like, oh, they only do that about things that they actually really care about, and they're actually being clever and signaling to me that this is like a really important thing they're saying.
mhm. Interesting. Okay, let me try one. Like if I was really obsessed with people being late and it was upsetting me, I could do a counteraction. I can say, I hope they're late. I like when people are late. I love when people come 10 minutes late so I have time to chill. Or like, if someone's on time, then I'll have to fire them. Or like just I could just do like these weird, it's almost like Socratic counteractions where you do the ludicrous opposite to open up the issue, you know?
Yeah. It feels a lot to me like reframing,
hmm I
you
think all
know?
of the D biases are reframes,
Mm, yeah.
you know.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh my God, it's so funny on page 57 where he says there's a common conviction that some false beliefs may be worth believing in. It may be fun to check your horoscope from time to time, even to believe them. But the ability to think for yourself and differentiate between fact and fiction has much higher stakes than your entertainment. I I love how that was funny. He reaches out as astrology. It's just fake, obviously. Whatever. But okay, so moving forward, there's an interesting part where he says a key factor of the entrepreneur's success is his ongoing endeavor to optimize his mind. That's, I guess, why I'm interested in this book, other than the fact that you brought it to my attention, is that, as an entrepreneur, we're always trying to sharpen the saw or get better, get smarter. I mean, that's how you get better at business is becoming better, especially if you're your own product, right? Like you have to get better in order to like improve your product. Um, so I think optimizing the mind is a good thing. I mean, all debiasing anything that you don't like, you know, get rid of that and then go forward into an optimized mind.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like what he's saying too about kind of I don't think that he says this here necessarily this word, but like neuroplasticity and how like the more we can create different pathways in our brains, like try to figure out how you could motivate yourself to want the opposite of what, you're seeing or getting or or whatever you're triggered by. Try to figure out a way that that's a positive thing instead of a negative thing because your mind isn't, as he says, this fragile garden that's going to be like ruined, like it's actually good to challenge ourselves and to learn and adapt. And that is, like you're saying, like that's the heart of being an entrepreneur is having a spirit of continuous improvement.
Mhm. Let's read this quote from Musk. He says, or Musk sees people as computers, and he sees his brain software as the most important product he owns. And such and such and since there aren't companies out there designing brain software, he designed his own, beta tested every day, and makes constant updates. That's why he's so outrageously effective, why he can disrupt multiple huge industries at once, why he can learn so quickly, strategize so cleverly, and visualize the future so clearly. Wait, what did Musk design that's brain software?
Oh, what is the name of it? It has neuro in name, I think. But what they were working on was ways to interact with your brain. Um, he's really headed down the kind of like cyborg route.
Hmm, interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
And, Tesla and SpaceX are very, groundbreaking too.
mhm.
But yeah, what is that? His neural net thing? I forget.
Well, I think we can take this to heart for our own brains, and we can say that, if you constantly update your mental software, just like apps or computers have agile development, which is you're constantly developing forward, right? Like you constantly update your brain software by getting smarter or reading more books or whatever, that life will improve for you. I mean, that's what they do in computing, right? I mean,
Yeah, I think in computing there's more of a culture of like uh everything will become obsolete faster and faster. And so you do have to keep up. And so yeah, like you know, um, also change is exponential. So if you think about all the change that's happened in the last 100 years, someone born 100 years ago, so what they've seen, like, the introduction of electricity in houses or the telephone or, cars and the airplanes, and then not only airplanes were something that you like dressed up in a suit to travel on, but like people commute on planes now, like everyday people go on vacations all the time to faraway places. And then the internet, and it all has to do with like the microcontrollers are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and now you can have something in your iPhone is like more powerful than rooms full of computers were in the 50s and 60s. So these changes are exponential. So we have to adapt more and more quickly. And so I think his point about Elon Musk was like, so Elon Musk is making companies where you're like, you have I think maybe it's called Neuralink or something, where you'll be interfacing directly with people's brains. Or SpaceX, well, you'll be sending people into outer space, or like. So, and the kind of commodification of these things that aren't here yet, but are gonna get here quickly.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, I think like a part of that is like stay with the times and keep advancing as the world advances, keep advancing around you. I mean, they say readers are leaders, and it's like people who constantly are learning are constantly staying up with the times, constantly advancing with the advancements around them. And part of that is pulling out the nits and the biases, and part of it is just building on what is already excellent about you. I mean, I think if you keep pulling out nits and then building, pulling out nits and building, you will optimize your mind in many ways. And that is most entrepreneurs I know do that. Like my friend Casey, Casey's an entrepreneur and she has like all these books on her freaking bed, like just like you have all those books and I have all these books. Like everyone I know who's like an entrepreneur in any way or a leader, it like reads a lot of books and you know there's a quote here. It says, "You can inoculate yourself against the pain and confusion of facing the facts, and your worldview can become more and more robust." Basically, what he's saying is like face the facts, get smarter, change your brain, get more robust, be better. Continue to face your brain's error processing. Don't just be like, oh, and then my thinking, like, I don't know. I think a lot of people just arrive and be like, this is who I am. I'm 47. This is who I am. But like, according to this book, we should constantly be, upgrading the app the software that we have and face the facts.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like coming from it from this perspective, not the perspective of like, because you're a moral failure and you're born with original sin and you're flawed. Like that's not the point to me at all.
Here, I inoculate you from your original sin.
Oh, thank you.
I'm a rosary maker.
Yeah, yeah, you are.
All right. Well, I don't know. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about from the biases chapter?
No, I think we've done it.
Okay. So that chapter is all about biases. Now we're moving on to chapter 3, which is values and the methods of introspection. Which, you know, I guess we're looking at introspection in this chapter. So I'd ask you, like, how do you define introspection?
I think identifying your values is something similar to what we were practicing in manifestation of like figuring out what you really want, like you really want, not what the bandwagon wants,
Hmm.
but like what is at the core of what you want, and then those are how, how you identify your values because that's how you figure out what path and direction you want to take. When you're course correcting, you're that implies that you have a course and that you have a direction that you're intending to go in, right? And that direction should be laid out by your values, your core values. And maybe that's where you, Andy, put your astrological lenses on and f show how that's determined by your chart.
Hmm. Well, I think introspecto would be specto, which is to look, and then intro is inside. So introspection would be to look inside. And so he's saying in this chapter, there's different methods of looking inside of, to maybe define your values or whatever, but we have to, so the first quote he has in this chapter is, "It's not normal to know what we want. It's a rare and difficult psychological achievement." And you and I experienced this when we started manifestation theory of like the first trip up is what do you actually want? And that's the question that you have to define in manifestation is what are you manifesting?
Yeah. Yeah, and remember in the Lynn Grabhorn book, she was saying that if you have trouble with that, first identify what you don't want, because sometimes it's easier as humans for us to be like, I don't know what I want, but I don't want that. I don't want that. Don't want that. Maybe colored from past experience, and then you can at least eliminate the pathways you don't want to go down so you can start really understanding where you do want to go.
Mhm. He says we tend to take for granted that we know what we want. And I think, yeah, I think it gets being really clear about what you want helps the world know what you're trying to do. Um, you know, I think, yeah, but things can get watered down nowadays, with the constant media all over the place. Like if you're just talking on media, people have no idea what you want. They just see you talking. And, it's like you have to be really clear. But I mean, if it's okay to just chill, but I think when you define something you do want, then you got to hone in on wanting that and making that happen. He says it's easy to be delusional about our own self-interest, which we talk a lot about. That was the difference between a delusion and a manifestation. It's like the actual making of it happening is kind of more of a manifestation than just like thinking about waxing navel gazing about it and acting like it's real is different than actually going about making it happen, you know.
Yeah.
All right, now he's talking about distortions of introspection. Um, he's saying the algorithms which make people lead people astray are not simply distortions of memory prediction or pattern recognition, but they're distortions of introspection. So how would we know if we were having a distortion of introspection?
Oh, I don't really know. You tell me.
Well, he's talking about the illusion of control causes us to believe that we have more control over circumstances than we actually do. Um, and also falsely believing that we know which outcomes would make us happy. I mean, we dealt with this with Claudia in the Enlightenment book of like the, part of being happy is realizing you don't have a lot of control and giving up that illusion of control kind of thing. So I don't know, distortions of introspection. I mean, I don't know that you can really do introspection wrong.
I guess you can come to the wrong conclusions. Because this is kind of like the course in my favorite course in miracles lesson, which is we don't know what this is for. And so it's like maybe the example is like, something happens, uh, and it seems like a bummer, but that thing actually leads to something else happening, which turns out to be a great thing for you. And actually on the path of what you really wanted.
Hmm. What do you think about this falsely believing we know which outcomes would make us happy? Like, that's the thing is like when you go about manifesting something, you're like, I want to be the key, I want teleology to be the keynote at astrology conferences or whatever. It's like if that outcome did happen, maybe I would not be happy because of the effect it has on the astrology world or something like, but how are we supposed to know?
Right, right. Like, so maybe, you give the teleology keynote at NORWAC, and then all of a sudden you're inundated by people emailing you, and then people uh, swarming you, and people like picking on every word you've said, picking up on every word you've said, and then critiquing it. And then all of a sudden, like, you can't leave your house, you can't say anything, you can't, like, it's just like overwhelming that it's just too much, because that led to you being on the Oprah show, which led to you getting doxxed, and now people like are staking out across the street from your house and waiting. The paparazzi is waiting for you to leave, like, and you're just like, oh my God.
Yeah, I thought that outcome would make me happy, but it didn't. You know what I mean? Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess we don't really know until we manifest an outcome and then we have to evaluate if it made us happy. We don't really know.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to be able to trust your intuition and then follow your will, accept the things that you can't change, and just get on with it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, well, let's look at the butterfly effect. It states that there are certain systems which are so complex and sensitive to initial data that the precise prediction of outcomes becomes impossible. So he says that this explains why it's impossible to predict weather, because it can be said that a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil can cause a tornado in Texas.
Yeah. I think this gets back to quantum entanglement and free will because everything gets back to there for me. But I do think it's like back to that. I know I've said this before about the qubits and stuff that like they're ones and zeros, but if you think of like the surface of a sphere, it's not only a one or a zero, it's a one or a zero in a certain direction. And because the amount of all the points on a sphere are infinite, the number of directions you could be pointing in are infinite, and it's only a one or a zero in that direction. And you will never know. And there's only a probability, but it's only like the general probability of all of those directions. So you don't know in any one direction, and you can never even measure it because if you measure it, then you've kind of ruined it. Like Schrodinger's cat, you've opened the box, and now the cat is either alive or dead. It's no longer the possibility of being alive or dead. So, yeah, that's how that is what like with quantum entanglement, the probability is not even only of that qubit, it's of the all the other ones nearby it influence the probability of that one. So when you take that one out of the equation, it changes it for everything else as well. And the analogy is that like we, our individual consciousnesses are in that model like the bits, but we are all influence each other with quantum entanglement of the global consciousness that we're all part of.
Yeah, I think a good example of the butterfly effect is how one post on Facebook can change everything. Like people like think Facebook's nothing, and I was like, oh no, like I've been feeling the butterfly effect of Facebook for years. Like I can do one little move on Facebook because I make moves on Facebook all the time on purpose, and it has a widening effect. You know, sometimes you think something's going to have an effect and it doesn't, but sometimes you think something's no big deal and it has this huge effect. And I think you know, it's that idea of like, does nothing we do matter, or does everything we do matter a lot? And I think it's more safe to go with the idea that everything we do really matters because of the butterfly effect. Every single little thing you do matters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, okay. So he says, here's a quote. He says, the whole process of nature is an integrated process of immense complexity, and it's really impossible to tell whether anything that happens is good or bad, because you never know what the consequences will be of the misfortune, or you never know what the consequences will be of good fortune. So we don't really know. Like if you get your manifestation, there might be like negative consequences to that. And if you don't get your manifestation, there might be positive consequences to that. And like we never know what's good or bad or good or you know, so what do you think of that?
Well, I think that everything's like a ride, you know, and an experience, and we know what kind of experiences we prefer or don't prefer. So, as long as manifestation means actually working to try for an outcome to happen, it's more likely that it will happen that way than the opposite way. And then, so it's more likely that you'll enjoy the ride. So, I say do it.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, yeah, I'd rather go towards a goal and then decide I didn't like the outcome of the goal than just sit around like floofing my underwear. Like, I don't know, like you know, I'm a, well, you and I are goals people, right? And like it's fun for us to see what happens with them, you know, trying and things like that. But I do think there's a good lesson here is like we don't really know. I mean, So there's a butterfly effect, and we can flap our wings on Facebook and cause a wave somewhere, but it's like we don't really know if that was good or bad or what is what, or it's like, and I think this comes under a choice of I would just choose to see everything as good. I mean, everything, even rejection. I'm like, oh, good, a rejection. I don't know. Like I don't
Yeah.
like thank you God for another redirection. Like they say, like a rejection is God's redirection.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think when you go about things with intent, then it's easier to notice what the effect is and be resilient and incorporate that to like the next level and the next level. Yeah.
So he says there's this thing called an impact bias. Here's another bias. He says it causes us to poorly forecast how we will feel about a certain event or decision, how intense that feeling will be, and how long it will last. I kind of don't like this guy. I mean, if I was being truly honest, because he's like too much. He's too like he's very negative. I mean, not negative, but he's like talking about all these biases, and by talking about them, he's like creating them basically.
Hmm.
Maybe I just don't like this chapter.
Hmm.
But it's like, oh, well, now we poorly forecast how we feel about a certain event or decision. I don't really think I do that. I don't have that bias. I awesomely forecast what's going on. I mean, I don't know. I just don't think that my mind is plagued with these negative states of being.
Oh, right. Yeah, I see. I understand that critique because I do often feel like in some of the books I was having the problem with the Lynn Grabhorn book where she's like, well, she just like uh anticipated that you are not a go-getter and you aren't like directing your own life and she's trying to kick you in the butt to get you to do it. I'm like, well, yeah, I don't really like being kicked in the butt and I'm doing it just fine.
Yeah, yeah.
But maybe some of these things are to just point point it out to us and then we can ponder and say, like, all right, cool, I get it. And that's not really my problem.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we're just thinking here, and people have probably been like, why are you talking about this stuff? It's just you're making these like kind of like non juicy episodes. And it's like you and I are just literally reading this book and just thinking about what it's saying. And it's like we have no idea what effect we don't know what this is for other than our own self-development. And why to release it on YouTube? I mean, I guess it's like somebody might find it useful, but I think we're just trying to see what does this guy say about optimizing the mind. And I think the lesson that I am learning here is that if you have things about your mind that you don't like, change them. That's the biggest lesson that I'm getting from it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, this is a good talk. I know you're having a low chi day, but or your social battery was not that high or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's always nice to talk to you, Andy.
Nice. I'll talk to you not maybe not later, but I'll talk to you soon.
All right, cool.
All right, bye.
Bye.